The views, comments, and opinions of the following program do not necessarily reflect those of Morris Media Studios, MorrisMediaLive.com, or its affiliates. Listener discretion is advised.
Greetings, beloved. Welcome to Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. It is a joy to have you here with us. Indeed, during this very painful yet powerful weekend when we, of course, remember the 20th anniversary of the attacks, commonly became known as 9/11. Certainly remembering and reflecting on those who've been affected by this, those that we've lost that particular day in New York City, in Washington, D.C., and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. We've seen many programs, this past week, just with a lot of reflections from those that were lost. Also, the first responders, and that we also lost. So a lot of remembrance and reflections. While I did not plan it, I ended up being in the place, in the city, where I was 20 years ago, when, America's heart was deeply pierced and irreparably, damaged by what happened on that particular day. I was in the Bay Area in Oakland, California, for a memorial service that I was invited to come and officiate over and eulogize a dear friend. And so I could not help being in that place, where I served as the pastor of Downs Memorial United Methodist Church. I was there for 7 years, and 27 months into my appointment, 9/11 happened. And that certainly changed, how I would do ministry, my colleagues around me, how we would do ministry together. As well as, what happened in the aftermath of that. Then the junior member in the House of Representatives from California, my congresswoman then, Barbara Lee, of course, made a very courageous speech and cast a very historic vote that really brought her a lot of challenges. And this past week, she reflected on just all the messages that she received as a result of that. I could not help in the pain of what happened 20 years ago, yet in the midst of that, the courage. Because, it set the country on a whole different path. We're going to start off, with just playing, that speech, because I think you cannot have one, without the other. I think our networks, they've done a great job in terms of just, pulling together, remembering everyone. But today we want to go a little deeper and kind of bring together, how we do here at Faith Without Borders, and that is to have a thought-provoking yet solutions-driven, truth-telling conversation with the framework of, both sacred resistance, but also the framework of moral reimagination. And I have just the right person to do that with me, and I'll introduce him, afterwards. But let's start off, with this brief but very, very bold, speech, by then a junior member of the House of Representatives, then my Congresswoman, and still one that I admire so much, Barbara Lee, as she makes a almost like a 1.5 to 2 minute speech that I thought changed the trajectory of how we came to where we are, and how we have to continue to remember and to see how we can heal, but with that healing, never surrender our courage and our hope. Here's Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
From California, Ms. Lee.
Gentlewoman from California is recognized for a minute and a half.
Thank you, and I want to thank our ranking member and my friend for yielding. Mr. Speaker, members, I rise today really with a very heavy heart, one that is filled with sorrow for the families and the loved ones who were killed and injured this week. Only the most foolish and the most callous would not understand the grief that has really gripped our people and millions across the world. This unspeakable act on the United States has really forced me, however, to rely on my moral compass, my conscience, and my God for direction. September 11th changed the world. Our deepest fears now haunt us. Yet I am convinced that military action will not prevent further acts of international terrorism against the United States. This is a very complex and complicated matter. Now, this resolution will pass, although we all know that the president can wage a war even without it. However difficult this vote may be, some of us must urge the use of restraint. Our country is in a state of mourning. Some of us must say, let's step back for a moment. Let's just pause just for a minute and think through the implications of our actions today so that this does not spiral out of control. Now, I have agonized over this vote, but I came to grips with it today, and I came to grips with opposing this resolution during the very painful yet very beautiful memorial service. As a member of the clergy so eloquently said, as we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. Thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
As we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. I used those words as part of my eulogy yesterday because it was just important for me to put what was happening locally within the context of what was happening nationally. For we do not live in a vacuum, nor did 9/11 take place in a vacuum. This morning, it's just a joy for me to have my brother and my friend Gerald Lenoir here with me. Gerald and I go way back when I was in the Bay Area. We started working on issues of HIV and AIDS and how it affects the black community, to issues around immigration, where he joined me and provided some strategic and much needed leadership in the founding and the formation of the Black Alliance for Just Immigration. He later on became its founding executive director and did a lot of groundwork in building the organization. He knows that I love him dearly, respect him, and it was great to connect while I was there, just to be together. And so I've invited him just to join me, to just get a little deeper into this topic, reflections on 9/11, lessons, consequences, and hope. That's going to be the first segment of today's Faith Without Borders podcast. And so glad to have Gerald here with us. He serves as the analyst at the Othering and Belonging Institute for Identity and Policy Strategy. And he's doing a tremendous work there with the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. Good morning, my brother. How you doing?
Good morning. I'm doing great, Pastor Sauls. Good to be with you.
Good to see you, man. And as always, I love that background. I'm gonna have to work with Felicia to see what we need to do with our background here. So you've just reminded me of what we got to do. I've always appreciated that background. Listen, man, good to see you. Hope you, Karen, and the family are doing well. How are you guys doing?
We're doing good. We're staying safe and sound here in the Bay, and just really great to see you this weekend or this past few days in the Bay, and glad to be with you today.
Yes. Listen, man, I know we've had some conversations, and I always appreciate our conversations because it just, really invites me to go a little deeper. And I know all of us, we've been reflecting on what happened that day. But today I really want to, kind of go a little deeper. And as I said, frame it around ongoing, resistance. And I want to just lift up an article by Naomi Brain entitled, "What If 9/11 Had Never Happened?" I thought that was just a good way to just help us maybe reimagine what could have been. We'll get to what is, but what could have been. And in that article, she writes, in New York City before 9/11, there was a vibrant, multiracial, people of color-led movement against police brutality in response to a series of police killings. But after the attacks, protests against law enforcement were silent for years. Had 9/11 never happened, the NYPD might have been reined in rather than unleashed, perhaps changing police conduct nationwide. And we know where we find ourselves now in terms of what's been happening, around that. So let me just, ask you for your thoughts, on that, article, and we're going to go into a little bit about, what could have been, if 9/11 didn't happen. I mean, there were certain departments like Homeland Security we wouldn't have had. We probably wouldn't have had ICE, and just probably wouldn't have had two wars, right?
Yeah.
Just the amount of resources, So just some reflections from you, around what if 9/11 had never happened, just some thoughts from you.
Yeah. Pastor Sauls, as I read that article, I thought about what was going on at that time, which was right before 9/11 happened. The UN had a conference in your home country of South Africa, the World Conference on Racism, where people from all over the world came together to address the issues of race and xenophobia in the world, and to make recommendations to the UN and the member countries about how to combat white supremacy and racism. There was a lot of momentum coming out of that conference, and 9/11 happened right as that conference was ending. And in fact, many people got stuck in South Africa because planes were grounded as they were trying to come back to the U.S. and other countries in the world. And as that article, what if 9/11 had never taken place, pointed out, there was a lot of momentum about addressing police misconduct and murder around the whole issues of racial justice. That got pretty much squashed in the aftermath of 9/11. There was a lot of momentum going on. There was a lot of organizing across borders and across communities to address some very serious issues of uh, racial justice and police brutality, and a whole range of issues related to uh, uh, the liberation of not only Black people, but people of color across the globe. So I think that that kind of momentum was cut short once 9/11 happened, and the attention of the country refocused on quote unquote terrorism in the world without addressing some of the domestic terrorism and domestic issues that we were all hoping to address in the 21st century.
Yeah, and that's so true. And sometimes I think we, when we zoom in on a particular event, as destructive and as momentous as it can be, such as 9/11, it's almost like everything else gets, pushed aside, and we look at this particular event in isolation. I have been, and I'm still making my way through two documentaries, one on Netflix around 9/11, which does a very, very powerful job of providing, it's called Turning Point, of providing, just the background of what led up to, 9/11 and what happened. You see, that was part of one, the Cold War, and the proxy war, that took place, that the CIA initiated then, that took place, with us arming the Mujahideen, right, in Afghanistan to fight the Soviet Union. Of course, one of the leaders of that movement was Osama bin Laden. So powerful, powerful. I encourage folks to check that out. And then, of course, you alerted me on Spike Lee's documentary on HBO Max, which is getting into all the conspiracy theories, around this. But he also brings then a very, very domestic perspective. So Turning Point brings a global geopolitical perspective, and Spike Lee does a very, very domestic, one. So it'll be good to bookend those two and watch them both, just to kind of get, all of the kind of get a full view of what was going on. But certainly, this did not, happen in isolation. In this article, Naomi Raine lifts up, three, aspects that or consequences, of 9/11. One she mentions is the valorization, of law enforcement. Secondly, a deliberate fostering of Islamophobia, and one can add there, black immigrants, or immigrants of color, if you will. And then, of course, two wars, which combined, on the one hand, retribution, right, which is what Barbara Lee feared, and that has come to pass now, especially what happened, the last couple of weeks, with ending, one of those, wars, America's longest war in Afghanistan, and retribution combined with the crusade to save Americans, which still continues. Your thoughts just on, maybe there are some other consequences that you are aware of, but just some thoughts from you about the ones that Naomi mentioned, because that, I think, then begins to lay the groundwork of what then, happens after that, and, brought us to where we are today.
Yeah. The aftershocks of 9/11 are profound. It reshaped the politics in the U.S. It gave a platform for white nationalism. It gave a platform for the warmongers within the Bush administration and beyond. And so the consequences were that we had this massive bureaucracy develop, the Department of Homeland Security. We had the consolidation of a right-wing, xenophobic, racist network of activists across the country concentrated in a group called Federation of Americans for Immigration Reform, which has a very, if you look that up, you'll find that it is steeped in white nationalism. They began to promote this xenophobic narrative that began to, and the government began to round up Arab people, began to profile Arab people, began to really consolidate within the administration a point of view that Arabs and immigrants of color in general were criminals, that they were terrorists. So as a result of that, then we roll into the issues around the border, around this notion that terrorists are coming in through the border. Then it begins to generally other, if you will, immigrants of color across the globe. And so you get this very large surge in detentions and deportations and within the immigration field. Within you mentioned the valorization of police officers. So you get the massive increase in the militarization of police forces across the country. You get the war on drugs begins to escalate, and you get this siege mentality, and this fear begins to take hold within the country as a whole, and gives free rein to the Department of Homeland Security, to police departments, to crack down on what they term terrorists, criminals. That lays the platform for the rise in white nationalism that we end up with Bush as our president. And so I think 9/11 set that stage on the domestic side. On the international side, within the Bush administration, we had Cheney and Rumsfeld, Vice President Cheney and Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, who had this notion, this doctrine of war on two fronts. So they were prepared to fight two wars simultaneously. And so they first launched the war against Afghanistan, and then under false pretenses launched the war on Iraq. So we get both war and racism intertwined. And I think in our social movements today and in our thinking, we need to understand how those two things are intertwined, and how we have to be able to, we have to fight those wars on two fronts in terms of really looking at how racism and white supremacy is an international system that really denigrates and dehumanizes people across the globe. And so I think that 9/11 was the beginning of a real consolidation of a white supremacist, xenophobic movement that culminates in the election of President Donald Trump.
Yeah, not just there, but on the global front, reflecting on what happened in South Africa, when I read the legislation for the creation, of Homeland Security because of this the state of emergency, it really took me back, to South Africa, where the state of emergency there was declared, and saw some similar wording, that the apartheid regime used, you see, that was also included, in how now, a terrorism was to be, challenged, and the definition of a terrorist, right? And the consolidation of, South Africa, the U.S., and other countries bringing their list of terrorists together. And for the most part, these were, people of color. In fact, truth be told, President Nelson Mandela was on that list, until, he had to visit the U.S. and there had to be legislation passed to get him off the list. I mean, that's how far-ranging that list was, and how broad that definition, of terrorists was. But not just that, it then provides then license, right, permission, if you will, to so many other, countries and leaders, whether they were elected democratically or whether they were dictators, to begin to now loosely use this term, just like South Africa did, in their quest to maintain and sustain the ideology and the theology of apartheid in their definition of who a terrorist was, but everybody now, started calling whoever disagrees with them politically, ideologically, and otherwise a terrorist, around that. So just the profound impact globally, and then of course, domestically, in this article, Naomi Ryan, writes, these three developments were and are deeply interconnected, as Islamophobia and border anxieties fueled militarized policing domestically, as well as, war in Afghanistan and Iraq. She goes on to say the militarized masculinities, right, of law enforcement and crusading war reinforced each other within the broader U.S. culture and continue to reverberate today across, the far right. Your thoughts on just her assessment on the interconnectedness of this, and the consequences of that, and where do we go from here? As we've clearly created a sense of who belongs, right, on the one end, and who will be otherized on the other end.
Yeah. It takes me back to the 1950s when a Republican president coming out of office, Dwight David Eisenhower, made a famous speech where he said, quote, "Beware of the military-industrial complex." The impulse to war has always been a part of the U.S. empire, to expand its empire, to go to the Middle East as we did, to secure the oil routes, if you will, to squelch any kind of protests in social movements in the U.S. that oppose empire. And so I think that that analysis in that article, "What if 9/11 had never taken place," is really spot on. That we've seen historically how dissent has been squashed. We saw it in the 1950s with the McCarthy period, where there was a communist under every bed. We saw it in the 60s with the COINTELPRO program of the FBI, the counterintelligence program, that sought to neutralize, quote unquote, the black movement. We're seeing it now in the 21st century with the Patriot Act that you're referring to, that legitimizes domestic and international spying. It legitimizes racial profiling, and it really jeopardizes the few freedoms that we continue to have. And so I think that 9/11 gave license, if you will, for the right to consolidate this militaristic, racist ideology and narrative that continues today.
You mentioned the group FAIR, which we should lift up. They're still very, very active in terms of their xenophobic, you know, policies, and I dare say that FAIR is not just operating just in the U.S., but it's operating around the world in terms of how it undergirds. I'm convinced that they're doing it how it undergirds, xenophobic behavior and tendencies, and I dare suspect that they are just like undergirding apartheid then, and that they are certainly fueling all of this even in South Africa right now, where that is going on in terms of just xenophobic behavior, tendencies, and also violence, against immigrants. But they used 9/11 to just really go on a long-term strategic direction around the anti-immigrant movement, that in so many ways, changed, or created a new political climate in the United States, and I dare say, around the world. So, I also checked out, another article in terms of 21st century white nationalism, where a gentleman by the name of Ethan Faree really kind of zooms in on FAIR's, political strategy around just how to create this ecosystem, of anti-black or anti-people of color, right? Which then it seems, it appears, both as brain and foul in these articles, basically say this is what then constructed the road towards where we find ourselves now, right? With white nationalism, intertwined with, the right-wing conservative politics, and then you have in there white Anglo-Saxon Protestantism and all of that, all of it just really creating a gumbo, if you will, of just anti-blackness, which is, it seems, where we find ourselves now, and that all, it seems, was kicked off, or 9/11 being a catalyst for that.
Yes, and so what you get is a whole network of white supremacist groups that begin to really influence the politics and the ideology of America. So not only FAIR, but you get Breitbart, you get the Center for Immigrant, CIS, Center for Immigrant Services, that is part of that network. You get the Koch brothers, who fund the Tea Party movement and fund a network of think tanks that really begin to work on shaping the narrative and the ideology of white supremacy in this country. And you get the attacks on the Obama administration that lasted his whole 8 years. You get the birtherism movement out of the stew that begins to ferment out of 9/11. You get this whole consolidation across the spectrum of issues that really takes precedent over the liberal politics of the Democratic Party, and begins to create this climate and atmosphere of fear, hate, of racial animosity, in taking advantage of both the conscious and unconscious bias that many people in this country, particularly white people, but not just white people, unconscious bias around race, around immigration, around faith issues, the Islamophobia, all these latent, oftentimes latent tendencies begin to rise because of this network of right-wing groups that begin to really take advantage of the moment and the climate in the country after 9/11 to promote these right-wing and hateful policies and ideologies.
Yeah. Ethan, Faur, and I have a hard time pronouncing his name. It's Faure, with an apostrophe on that E. In this article, 21st century, white nationalism writes the following. He says, the terrorist attacks of 9/11 offered a pretense to build upon a criminalization and mass deportation apparatus created by laws fair and anti-immigrant movement helped, author in the 1990s. So again, I mean, this time of reflection, as I said yesterday, yes, it's a time for mourning, but I think it's also important to realize, as Barbara Lee goes on to say, but we do not have to sacrifice our moral compass as we mourn for the pain caused by the destruction, of that took place on 9/11. Yes, there has to be accountability, but I think it is also important that we realize that these are not isolated incidences, geopolitically within a global context, as well as within a domestic context in in the United States. And so the question just becomes, and I listened to President Biden's speech on Friday evening talking about that, the America that he remembers and wants to bring us back to is this one of unity. It's very interesting, that, we lift up, unity in a very, very peculiar way around how unity, if it's unity around, mourning with one another and undergirding one another, we have to do that. But I think if we're talking about, a unity, around immoral wars, globally, and then what took place, domestically, then one has to really, as we did in South Africa, question, is that an authentic unity or is that a false unity? And then also to beg the question, unity towards what or unity for what? And so I'm wondering, lifting up the unity, immediately post 9/11 that led into the Patriotic Act, right? Which in so many ways fueled, us organizing the Black Alliance for Just Immigration because of the anti-black, movement that then, basically resurfaced and was reinforced, during that time. And the disunity, of today, I mean, it just begs the question, as you juxtapose unity then, disunity now, what's the hope of what it is that we need right now as we move forward, dealing with both the disunity, but not just the disunity, but just the anti-blackness, dealing with, the ongoing valorization, of, law enforcement, what's happening, around, not being able to get, comprehensive immigration reform, just the selective responses to crises, around the country and around the world, and how really, these policies, get conceived and implemented.
Yeah. One thing that President Biden got right is that we are in the battle for the soul of this country. And leading that battle is the Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we've seen in the 21st century is not only the rise of xenophobia and white supremacy and the social movements that support that, but we've also seen the rise of social justice movements across the board. Black Lives Matter movement, the largest demonstrations across the world in the history of the world, and so. And then we've seen the rise of the immigrant rights movement. When the Black Alliance for Just Immigration was formed, we saw the largest demonstrations for immigrant rights in the history of the country. And at that time, the largest demonstrations ever in this country in 2006. We've seen the rise of the climate justice movement, mm-hmm. demanding that we do something about climate change. Largest demonstrations in the history of the climate change movement in this century. We see the rise of the women's movement, the Me Too movement, and the demonstrations that happened at Trump's inauguration. So we're seeing social movements rising to the occasion to challenge white supremacy, misogyny, war. We've seen the rise of the anti-war movement, although it's ebbed in recent periods. It was a major force at the beginning of the war in Iraq. And so really, how do we challenge the direction this country is heading in, and how do we become a country where everyone belongs, where there is no other, where there is a sense that we have an identity that cuts across our racial identities, that cuts across our gender and gender identity, that we can come together to fight back against this, what the right wing would like this country to become. Mm-hmm. And so I think the hope that I have is that these social movements can continue to grow, that can begin to look at how we can coalesce across those different movements and across those different communities and challenge forcefully the direction this country has been headed for a long time. And so part of that means pushing this Biden administration beyond the limits of what it's willing to go, and pushing Congress in becoming involved in elections, but also staying in the streets and putting pressure on the powers that be mm-hmm. To address the issues that our communities need addressed.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank those that are joining us via Facebook. Folk are with us from South Africa. I see my sister Nancy Heron, childhood friend, that's joining us from South Africa. Grateful that Busi is joining us from New Jersey. So glad that you guys are with us, as we engage, in, just these critical, reflections. Indeed, as you said, Gerald, the key is just the ongoing work on the one end of sacred resistance, which I'm an unapologetic partner in that movement, but also on the one hand, as Bishop William Barber puts it, the whole exercise of engagement, around moral reimagination. And I think Barbara Lee, Congresswoman Barbara Lee, holds those two together. And it's not a coincidence that she quotes, one of the clergy that provided leadership at that memorial service, which underscores the role that progressive and prophetic faith movements play in this. And I'm glad to have been, raised and formed, in that movement, in South Africa, around how do we, continue to just engage in, sacred resistance. I want to give you the final word, but let me just lift up, again, from, Ethan's, article, 21st Century White Nationalism, because it's key to not miss this, because right now the FBI has determined that the number one threat, to U.S. security is domestic, terrorism. And that was put off, 20 years ago. But at the same time, it was also unleashed, 20 years ago, as we've seen in these two articles, that we're referring to. Let me, give you an opportunity for final words, but read this for you that comes out of this article. Trump understood something about the war on terror. And actually, both articles make the case that that as Trump always lived his life, he takes advantage. He's an opportunist, right? He takes advantage, of opportunities. For the most part, opportunities that can be characterized as exploitation, discrimination, and marginalization. That's how he ran his businesses and also his administration. Trump understood something, and deception, I should mention. Trump understood something about the war on terror. Spencer Ackerman notes in his recent book, Reign of Terror, how the 9/11 era destabilized America and produced Trump. He writes, Trump recognized that the 9/11 era's grotesque subtext, which is the perception of non-whites as alien marauders, even as conquerors from a hostile foreign civilization, was its engine. That subtext has powered 2 decades of exclusionary policies, fomented state and vigilante violence against Muslims, and perpetuated untold atrocities abroad. Your final comments, on this, because we're going to pick this up, as we look at how these atrocities continue, just in a, quote, humane way, which is a recent book that was just published. And we're going to check on that in terms of, this withdrawal doesn't mean that the U.S. is not participating, in war, but it just participates now in war, continuing atrocities, but just in a so-called, humane way. Final thoughts from you, Gerald?
Yeah, we're coming off a period where we had 20 years of continuous war, the longest war we've ever had. We're coming off a period where the police murders and police brutality have been all-time high. We're coming off a period now where climate change is threatening the very existence of the planet and everyone and every living thing on it. And so it behooves us, faith-based groups, social movement groups, electoral groups, to really come together across our communities to address these challenges and to address the pandemic, to address the fact that our government has not been responsive to the needs of its people, and that we need to figure out how can we make government responsible, how can we address some of the debates within Congress around our voting rights, how can we address some of the debates in Congress around the stimulus packages that are now in Congress being debated. And so we have to be vigilant and active in addressing the complex issues that face us in the 21st century. So thank you, Pastor Sauls, for having me. I appreciate it.
Gerald Lenoir, my brother from another mother, thank you so much for joining me, man. I always appreciate your insights. Gerald, long-term, activist, and cut his teeth, of course, in the anti-apartheid movement, and he's still at it. He right now serves as Identity and Politics Strategy Analyst at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. So glad that he was able to join us. We're going to switch gears here as we look at one of the consequences of what we've just talked about, which has resulted in this, recall election that we are preparing for here in California. And we are all on the ground doing whatever we can to continue to resist, this ongoing strategy of minority rule by the Republicans, and the religious right. We're going to take a quick break, and afterwards we're going to be joined, by Pastor William Smart, President and CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference of Southern California. Let's take a quick break, set up, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. We continue our conversation today because we are facing a consequential election that is going to go down on September the 14th. That is this coming Tuesday, which is the gubernatorial recall election. Again, as I mentioned before, I believe one of the consequences of what we are dealing with right now in the United States, which is just this broad-based attempt, by way of deception, discrimination, by way of division, and the quest for minority rule by the Republicans and the religious right. Yes, we put them both together because it's not just an ideology, it's a theology as well. And a person that I work with, another brother from another mother, he is on the streets right now, somewhere in Los Angeles, where we are about to do some Sauls to the polls, work as part of our Get Out the Vote for, Tuesday's election. Pastor William Smart, President, CEO of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, Southern California. Pastor Smart, good morning. Good morning. How you doing, my brother?
Good morning. Good morning, Pastor Sauls, and it's always an honor to be with you, Faith Without Borders. And you see Felipe and Jesus getting ready. The truck, the sign is up. That we're getting ready to hit the streets for Sauls in the Polls.
Yes, sir.
Sauls in the Polls is a program that really started. I was a part of years ago. It was initially called Gideon's Army, where leaders of all the denominations came together in 1992 to support then President Clinton's run. But today it evolved in Florida to Sauls in the Polls, going to vote. One variation of it is going to vote on Sunday, and some of the polls are open on this Sunday. We're encouraging people to go to vote no. There's the sign, September 14th, vote no on the recall. But you can vote today. You can go online and see where that's close to you. My wife and I, we voted yesterday, and the polls will be open till 7 o'clock today. Same thing on Monday, and then of course on Tuesday. You can also mail your ballots in, or you can take them to one of the special boxes that are outside post offices and outside libraries, and you can put them in there, drop them in there today. That's the important thing. And so Pastor Sauls to the Polls is encouraging people to get out there. We're today in Oakland, San Francisco. We got trucks in a truck in San Francisco going around. We're in Fairfield, California. We're doing some activities in San Bernardino, San Diego. So we're getting out the vote, and we're encouraging people to say no, vote no. And as a preacher, even from your pulpit today, let me tell you, as long as you get up there and say, I'm so-and-so, and I encourage you to vote no, that's not a violation of your IRS status, because you, as an ordinary citizen, told them who you were voting for. That's real important. That's a rule that I actually helped make in 1996 with the
Right.
Democratic Party.
Yeah,
So,
indeed. That's so important. Man, it's good to see you out there with my brothers, Felipe and Jose. Tell them we say hi. I know we
there they are. They waving to you.
we always on the street together.
They're
There
always
they are. There they are. Great, great brothers. I just appreciate Pastor Smart the work that we continue, around unity and solidarity between black and brown here for us here in Los Angeles, and we continue to deepen that work in so many ways. Yes, we at Faith Without Borders, of course, support unapologetically the no vote. I cast, my ballot on Thursday before I headed up to, I believe on Wednesday, one of those 2 days. I cast my ballot, and I used one of those special boxes. Very convenient. I drove up, just got out of the car, and put it in, and then just head straight out. Those boxes are secure. Later on, when I got back, I received a notification that my ballot was received, and also a barcode as to how I can track my ballot. So we just want you to know that these are secure, opportunities for people to safely access, spaces to
Right.
vote and exercise, their vote. So that's very, very important. And before we finish, we'll give people the times again for that. But Pastor Smart, I want us to, just talk a little bit, about, why it is so essential for us, to vote no, because this election will be very, very consequential, and it's not taking place in a vacuum. It's taking place because there is a national strategy, that the Republicans and the religious right have continued to engage in, around their vision, of the United States. So why is it so essential for us to make sure that we, get that vote out, and especially that no vote?
Yes, what is happening, what the Republican Party is doing, they're going back to the strategy of state rights over national rights. And whenever black and brown people have engaged in state rights, there are always problems. We always have depended on the federal government to protect us. And that's what Dr. King always talked about, that there are laws federally that can protect us. And so this whole movement, what they're doing in the states of changing the voter laws, they're in California, they can't change voter laws, but they found a way to possibly get rid of this governor. If that takes place, all of the African-American women he has appointed and men he has appointed, all of the movements on education, and also the whole lifting the support shelter, so that more support money has gone into for programs for the marginalized, the disenfranchised, and the vulnerable. Those programs have been very important. He has done that. We cannot, it has not been perfect, but it has been what has been needed right now. And we have to continue on the journey. I was on a call with him yesterday with other clergy from around the state, and they all have a strong desire to see him reelected and understand, no on the recall, and understand that the work is not done. We talked to him about things that we need to continuously do, but there are things that he has done that has a great record for our people, black and brown. So it's real important. And then possibly during his tenure, he will be appointing another U.S. senator. We don't know what will happen there if the opportunity comes his way or not, but he's ready to appoint an African-American woman. He has said that publicly. I think but nationally, we cannot afford to lose a senator right now. We cannot afford to get a momentum for the Republican Party nationwide if they take out California, the most populous state. So all of that's riding on this election. And, you know, yesterday we were in South LA. Today we're going to East LA, where we're going to start at Whaler, the historic Whalers Street Missionary Baptist Church with Pastor Tulis. And then from there, we're going to go around, and then we might we'll try to make it into South LA again. But it's real important that this no on the recall, Pastor Sauls, as you're doing and accentuating, comes forth so that our people know now's not the time. We cannot afford a person like Larry Alder to come forth, because that's not what we stand for. You know, I learned a long time ago when they were trying to get Clarence Thomas in there, and some of us were saying GBOC, that is, give the brother a chance, he will show his blackness. That never happened. Just the opposite. So Alder is not one that we can trust. He has shown that for years on what he has accentuated. And so, no, let's move. Let's go no on the recall. Galvin Newsom needs to continue to start finishing the job he has started.
Yeah, absolutely. Larry Elders indeed is not, representing, black folk. I mean, he is just really intoxicated, by, that ideology, that conservative, right-wing ideology. And, the two of us know that skinship, doesn't, mean kinship, in this regard. But not just that, just he stands, given the fact that we are in this pandemic, just he stands, on, basically, reversing policies, that's to protect, individuals, families, communities, our children, given what's happening with this third wave, so just his views around the pandemic is just, in my opinion, very, very, homicidal in terms of, what's going on right now.
Great. That's a great word. You might hear that from the truck today. Homicidal.
That's right. Homicidal tendencies, we have to be clear, in my study and reading of, white supremacy if you look at what's happening around white supremacy, whether it's gun laws, right now, the pandemic, there's just this tendency, to be so blinded by an ideology that one is not aware that one's actions and one's policies really, is resulting not just in the destruction of those who don't look like us, but in the destruction of those who certainly, look like us. So I think we have to be very, very, clear, around, around this. Souls to the polls certainly is part of, Pastor Smart, the work that we are doing around, sacred resistance. And we know that, yesterday there was a call, a statewide call between Governor Newsom and some of our, clergy leaders and pastors around the state. You were a part of that. I couldn't join because of that memorial service again. But anything came out of that in terms of just, the platform that we are, pushing with the governor in terms of making sure that it's not just about voting no to keep him in, but also to keep him on track, right? Around what needs to happen, in the state.
Yes. Several of the preachers actually before he got on, and then when he got on, they came up with a 4 or 5 point agenda that around criminal justice, around the pandemic, and more funding coming into our communities on the agenda on that, and then around housing. Housing was a real important thing that we came up with, and then also around the community development and how we need to look in business development in our communities. And so we talked about then leading to unemployment levels and different things like that. And cited some things that he had done and realizing that there was more he can do. And so we agreed that we would be meeting with him and a dedicated staff. And we're pushing for a dedicated African-American staffer that can help. And one time he told one of our leaders that he told one of our leaders that he was the person. Just come to him. And he gave several people his cell phone. And you just come to me. But we need a dedicated staffer there. And also, so those things were talked about, and we said we would convene with him after this process. You know, that we were with him, but after this process, there's a lot more. And, you know, the clergy community is different than the elected. Electeds. Right. The elected have their constituency, but all for the last 50 years of my life, I have been saying around America that it's the faith-based community that really has the constituents that they see or hear twice a week, at least on Wednesday and especially on Sabbath. Yeah. And so we can move them like no elected official can, and that's been proven.
Yeah.
You are.
And the key piece to mention is that call yesterday, you know, was, you know, multi-faith, you know, it was multiracial, multi-generational. So really, you know, that progressive and prophetic, you know, the faith that we're coming together as a united front, not just to say no to the recall. I know we made it clear yesterday. It's not about the person, but it's about his policies and his platform that we seek to, you know, influence and impact, so that we can get to beloved community, you know, in the sanctuary state called California, right? We may have lost Pastor Smart. He's there. He is. Pastor Smart, okay. Did you hear what I said last?
Yeah, yes. Moving, you know, you said my pet word, moving toward the beloved community, because we have kicked that off, and it's got stifled a little because of this. But in another week, we're going to be talking more about the beloved community. I hope to come back if you allow me to do that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, you know, we have to stay on the governor. We have to stay on all elected officials. Sometimes I believe we're last in all of the negative statistics in this state is because it's all right. It's important to have partnerships, but we have to have accountability sessions with our elected officials and tell them this is what we need. This is what we're looking for. Yeah. Things like that.
And part of those sessions, as you know, it's about truth telling, right? Because we all, the two of us know, truth results in freedom, deception results in destruction, and we've had deception at least for the last, you know.
You fell out. You fell out with a prominent. You fell out with a prominent official over that. That you were right, and allow us to say you were right. You know, at the time, you were absolutely right on the position that you state. And for our community, sometimes we have to look beyond ourselves and look at our community and the people that we serve. And from our perspective, see, we serve basically from the bottom up. We're here, grassroots up, moving up to improve the condition of our people. Some people serve from the top down. They just going to tell us what they want. That day's over. We're in the shape we're in as a people because of that. You know, lack of housing, poor health, and all of the types of concomitant variations that go with that.
Yeah, we absolutely.
And I appreciate you allowing me this opportunity, but we're starting to get ready to go.
So give us the times again for today. The voting is available. The times for that. Also the route, you know, because I'm going to try and join you guys, you know, at some point today.
Call us because we're going to be playing. We're going to go into East LA, and we're going to go around. We're going to be at Tulis's church, hopefully at 10, and the crowd us there. And then from there, we're going to go around East LA, and then we want to come back through South LA, particularly Leimert Park, and then from there we'll probably, the time goes by so fast. It'll probably be by that time 1 o'clock,
Okay.
1:30.
Okay.
So just text me. I'll let you know where we are.
Please, please. There you have it, y'all. It is, about, mobilizing and organizing. I'm going to ask Felicia just to put some images up, around reminding our folk what this vote is all about. It is about protecting civil rights. It is about, fighting, a conservative and right wing, recall. It's about unity between black and brown, but also with all those, who are, about, freedom. It is about reproductive freedom for all, and it is about saving, our democracy. That's what it's all about: saving our democracy from minority rule. Okay. That's what's happening right now. So Pastor Smart, thanks so much. We pray for safety there. I want to let you know that Pastor Dennis Singi from Malawi sends prayers, for the work that we're doing here, and we appreciate our partnership with him. Good to see my good friend Jerry Fox from Northern California. He joined us, and grateful for my sister Ann Hawthorne right here, in Los Angeles for the work that she's doing, with the United Methodist Urban Foundation and impacting lives there. And everyone else who joined us, thank you so much for joining us online and for receiving what we had on the menu today, just allowing, some reflection around, 9/11 and what if it didn't happen, and where we are because, it happened. I want to close with those words from the then junior Congresswoman from California, Barbara Lee, who's now a senior. She's the highest ranking African American woman, Congresswoman. And hopefully, if we, no, let me say, when we get, or we keep Governor Newsom in, and Senator Dianne Feinstein retires, our hope is, that, Barbara Lee would be considered, to replace her. So that's just, my prophetic, call out, to the governor. And that's why I voted, no on the recall. But her words that I think will forever be a guiding light, to me, ever since I heard those words 20 years ago when I was, in her, living and working in her district in Oakland, California. When we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. When we act, let us not become the evil that we deplore. Thank you for joining us in our work around sacred resistance and moral reimagination. This has been Faith Without Borders. I'm your host, Pastor Kelvin Sauls. Participate in redistricting, gatherings, so that we can make sure that we limit gerrymandering. That's, of course, in the playbook right now. So please make yourself available for those redistricting meetings. Your voice counts, and it's very, very important. And then also, don't forget, Californians, if you haven't voted yet, you can vote today through Tuesday, in this recall election. Thanks so much. Let's continue to march towards beloved community. One love.